Well met, travelers and adventure seekers. Welcome to this special interview between Crosshead Studios and Dicetale Games, where we'll be discussing the new dark fantasy RPG, Blood and Doom. My name is Pim, I'm a writer, editor and creature designer for Crosshead Studios, and today I'm joined by Ferrucio Argento of Dicetale Games. Welcome Ferrucio. Please tell us something about yourself and the role you play in the development of Blood and Doom.
Good day, thank you for having me. A little bit about myself. I am the lead game designer and creative director of Blood and Doom, which is a brand new role-playing game. And it is actually the first game that I've ever developed. So I am not by trade a professional game designer, with a long-standing career of many games that came before this one. My job is actually a music producer. But I've been playing role-playing games fervently for, I think, almost 10 years now. Really loving it. I think it's one of the best hobbies that you can have because there's just something special when you're sitting around a table with your friends, talking to each other, sharing these special moments. And so I got into game designing and developing and writing Blood and Doom 2 years ago, after I just started having my own ideas for, so what could a game look like if I were to design it from scratch? What are the ideas that I like from several other games that I've played, and also the dark fantasy element. So as you already mentioned, somehow, and my players can confirm this, whatever game I play, it always turns out very dark. So whether it's D&D 5th edition or whether it's Call of Cthulhu, which in and of itself is of course a quite dark game, or whether it's Numenera. So I just like these darker, mysterious, thrilling and exciting, dangerous stories. And so that's what Blood and Doom is all about, and that's how the idea started to develop to create my own game. So in short, that's what I'm doing now, and it's been quite a ride, a lot of fun doing, and I'm learning a lot also from many of the more professional writers in my team who are veterans in the business, some of them, great artists on board, cartographers, and so it all comes together really nicely. And as you know, we just launched our Kickstarter, and it's going quite well. So I'm happy.
Yeah, awesome. And for a first project and a first development of a game, some people would say just start with a small adventure or maybe like an addition to an existing game. But you just went all out and you're like, oh no, we're starting with a 500-page core book and 2 extra books. We're getting any winning writers on the team, boatloads of artists. Why start so big? Why not just start small?
Good point. No, actually I did. So that's a misconception, because now people are seeing the game, of course, and they're realizing, oh, it looks quite big, but it's, I've been working on it for 2.5 years, I think, if I'm being exact. It actually started as a really small project. I was just writing it by myself. I had an idea of making a book that was maybe 50 pages. And that was it. There wasn't even a setting. It was just some rules that I thought would be really neat to try out. But then, of course, you want to find someone who does some artwork. And I'm not a painter myself, so I went around and looked for someone, which is how I got to know Mark Graham. He is actually the first person who came aboard the project, and he is still working on the project today. I don't quite know if it's maybe 90%, but at over half of all the artwork that you're seeing in the books are his. And before you know it, you start wanting to do a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that, and it started to develop. And he made these really great paintings, and then I wanted to write more about the setting. And then later on, I met Dirk van der Eycken, who I actually contacted because I was looking for someone to help me out with social media, and eventually, because at that time the Kickstarter was nowhere near going live, I was looking for someone to help out on that front. And he knows many of those writers that are now aboard the project, and he got them excited and he liked the project as well. And so things started kind of escalating from there, because then it was okay, so we have the setting now. We started throwing around some more ideas. Before you know it, it was a 300-page book. And then all of a sudden it didn't fit in one book anymore, and it became 2 books. And now it's 3 books. So actually what we're doing with the Kickstarter, the final books will have a total page count of over 1,200 pages. But they will all be nicely digestible books of around 375 pages. And each focuses on a specific aspect of the game as well. So you don't need to read all of those books. In fact, you don't need to read any of them. You just need to skim through them to kind of get a general idea of the game, if that's all you want to do. And one book will be the core rule book, which is all about the rules, the classes, the archetypes, the equipment lists, and also advice for the Doomsayer. The Doomsayer is the name given to the Game Master in Blood and Doom, by the way, so that your listeners know what I'm talking about. So that's actually a complete package, and you can, it's very ominous, and you can actually play the game perfectly fine with just the core rulebook. And there is, of course, some hints as to the setting of the game, but I think most people will find it pretty easy to put this in any setting of their own choice. But then there's the Guide to a Tier. This is the second book, which delves deeper into the world of a tier in which the game is set. So it's briefly touched upon in the core rulebook, of course, and also the origins that the players choose are all relating to the world of a tier. And this second book then goes into depth on all the regions from Athenia, the desert wastelands, to Ishtar, a land of jungles and great ziggurats, hiding mysteries of the past. So there's like 5 main regions, and they're all described in great detail. And you know what it is, Pim? When it starts getting really fun and you start having ideas, it's really difficult to not add a bit more, because I know that people will appreciate it. Especially, for example, if you write down the information about a city, I think some campaign books are lacking very useful information that I can immediately take to the table. For example, I want to know a list of NPCs that I can immediately use, and not just some names, but some descriptions, and what are they all about? What's their relation to this city? Some going-ons, some random things that you can roll or you can select from this table, and they're just things that are going on the street while players are entering this city. And local specialties, a lot of plot hooks, quest hooks, and also some looming dangers and looming threats and problems that are going on in the city. So, as you can imagine, that takes up some page count, and you add that up for this whole world. And basically it was impossible for me to fit both the core rules and the setting in one book. And I know you probably know as well, there's many books out there that do this, and they're quite popular actually. Books that give you a complete setting, and they're often based on an intellectual property of some kind, like a movie or a TV show or another fictional property. And it's usually all the rules and all the information you need in one book. But I imagine Blood and Doom to be like a big dark opera set in this gritty world. And I think because it feels so large and grand, I think that it deserves the extra pages. And the third book, then, to sum up, is all about the cults, because as you know, and we've spoken about this earlier, Blood and Doom centers around the fact that the world of Atir is actually in quite a bad spot. at this particular moment in time. The stars and the constellations are aligned in such a way that evil is rising, and there are 12 extra-dimensional entities somewhere in the universe that are being worshipped by these 12 cults. And they are gaining power, and many bad things are happening. And that is kind of the time period that the player characters are thrown into. This time where things are looking bad. Corruption is spreading. More malignant and malformed monsters are turning up. Omens are pointing to the fact that the stars in the skies are dimming. It looks like other worlds out there maybe are fading away. And the question is, are the characters brave enough to take on these cults and to do something about this doom that is coming, which is, of course, the name of the game, Blood and Doom. So I hope that explains it a bit. My apologies, by the way, if I go on one of my rants, because when I talk about something that I like, and I tend to sometimes say a lot of things at once.
I mean, I'm sure everybody likes to hear someone who's very passionate about their projects. And you describe a world that's very ripe for adventure, which always helps to enable players to play in it. Because many of these settings and worlds are like peaceful metropolitan areas. Like, all right, cool, but where's the adventure? Where's the hook that we can sink our teeth into?
Atir is all about adventure, basically, everywhere. And it has a very distinct flavor. And to come back to your initial point, is like, it keeps growing. It's like, of course, you can decide to finish up an 80-page book, but somehow there were so many ideas floating around in my mind, and other people got on board with also their own ideas, and eventually it just... I mean, 2 books we went to pretty early on, but 3 books that came later, when we decided that, my God, we really want to describe all 12 of these cults in great detail. But that won't fit either. So there needs to be a book dedicated only to the cults. And I think that is actually one of the things that people who are reviewing it and commenting on it are most enthusiastic about. I mean, not that they don't like the other parts of the game, but the fact that there's a specific book covering the setting and another book that's all about cults and how to set up an adventure or a campaign, because that's what the cult book does. It doesn't just describe the cults, it gives you the tools to build campaigns around these cults, and everything included, like their rituals, the spells that they know, the kind of monsters that they can summon, plus what is their plan. And their plan is divided into several different phases known as doom levels, and you start at the first doom level. And they're trying to accomplish some nefarious goal. And then, of course, you can make adventures around this. And whether they succeed or not determines if things start to escalate towards the second Doom level, which is when they want to do something else, something that gets them further along in their like grand scheme of things. And in this way, you can plan or easily write and set up an adventure or a campaign lasting multiple sessions, maybe even a year or longer, just based on one cult and all the information relating to it, because it lets you know everything that could happen and that they want to do, right up until the grand climax, which is usually, as you probably can guess, when things are gonna go really badly for everybody in the entire world, or at least a large portion of it. But of course, it's not gonna get that far, because the heroic player characters are gonna prevent that from happening.
I mean, we can at least hope so. Yeah, and indeed,
I hope so.
Like you said, most of the book is very well made to enable game masters, or in this case, the Doomsayers, to easily make and run their own adventures, which is, as a long-time game master myself, I really appreciate that. Especially the way you handle your monsters, and you include trackers and hit point trackers in the monster stats there as well. Very funny to use. Alright, speaking on the setting a little bit, anybody who's seen any of the promotional work and the artwork can guess that there's there's one major influence for this game, and that'll be the man, the myth, the legend himself, Conan the Barbarian. Big, burly, broad-chested guys fighting big monsters is all over the game. But were there any other pieces of media?
And girls, by the way. The girls are also pretty,
They're pretty buff as well. Yeah,
burly and Make no mistake, both are equally like badass in this game. Actually, all the characters and classes and the paintings that you can see of them, they're all badass. Like even the minstrel is like a rock and roll punk version who will just hit you with his spiked guitar in your face, and he looks like kind of like a piratey character in the painting. And I really love how they all have this sort of grit, a kind of an edge, which is needed, right? Because you need to have
absolutely
some characters who will know how to deal with all this darkness and looming danger. They need to be resilient and really tough. So yeah, I was just thinking about where you were going earlier with your point, and the fact that Conan was the inspiration, right? So, but among Conan also, I think for me personally, The Witcher has been an influence as well. And even though many of those like movies from the 80s, such as The Beastmaster, or even Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, The Dark Crystal, one of my most favorite movies, and also the TV show that's on Netflix now. And many of my writers are big fans of many fictional works. They're more they read a lot more than I do. I'll admit. I don't know why this is, but I love to consume TV shows and movies from a young age on, and it's these old adventure movies for me that triggered the inspiration for what you see here, mostly. And yes, Conan is a big inspiration, but I think that this world is quite different from that you see in Conan, because it's a more magical world, I'd say. It's not like high magic. It doesn't have like Dungeons and Dragons levels of magic. But there are, for example, in Ovadir, which is one of the deserts of Athenia, there are floating stones in the sky. And there's rumors of things that are up there. And of course, it's very hard for people to reach because they cannot fly. And there's two suns in the sky, Aurea and Isira. And there's all kinds of like crevices in the earth. And there's rumors of like other realms being down there that lead to dimensions beyond our own, where like mythical beings live. And so there's a little bit more wonder in this world than in Conan, though it still has that same grit and sort of toughness that Conan has. Yeah, definitely. But I do think that maybe it started out more as being influenced by Conan and developed slowly, as do many things, right? Developed into its own thing. And now also with the influence of the 12 cults. Yeah, and the 12 cults actually worship these alien entities, which were actually accidentally unleashed into this universe by an alien race many thousands of years ago. So there's also some science fiction elements in the game as well, which I won't spoil too much about for those who are listening, who maybe want to play the game and not necessarily be the game master. But there are some artifacts in this world which are from beyond it, actually, and that are, based on more technological advancements of a people from another planet. So yeah.
Oh, awesome! There's some not just a sword and sandal setting, but also some sword and planet, some John Carter of Mars influence there.
Sword and planets. I like that. I like that terminology. Yeah. Some people have said it has sword and sorcery influences, but it is definitely not a typical sword and sorcery game.
All right. So speaking on the art of the game, you mentioned Mark Graham as your main art contributor. anyone who's seen much of the art can see that there's a nice through line of the same style. I'm assuming there's multiple different artists working on it. Was there like a large collaboration or a large process to find the art style that you wanted for the game that like evoked the scenes and settings that you wanted? And is there any of the art that you like the best yourself, your favorites?
Ooh, okay, it's a good question. So, well, there's several ways to go about it, and of course, as you know, this entire project grew from just something very, very small. Basically just me writing my own sort of homebrew rule set. And of course, I did not have a super big budget, you know, like the larger companies out there, to just hire artists and ask them to make art for me. So what I did is I actually went onto I went and checked out DeviantArt, which maybe you know, this website.
Yeah.
And it's a place where like artists post their work and they're doing commissions and stuff. And it just took me like days and days, or maybe even weeks of scouring all that artwork and finding some art that I thought was really nice. And then sending out some messages to people and just asking them like, hey, you know, I'm working on this game and would you be interested in doing some art for it? And this way you can get in touch with people who have the talent to do what you're looking for, but who aren't quite yet at that level where they're asking you to pay 2,000 euros for each painting, you know, like super famous artists who are, I don't know, maybe doing artwork for the more well-known games out there. So obviously, I think finding that balance between something that was affordable for me at the time, while at the same time finding someone who had like a lot of talent and a lot of promise and could work with me and was willing to adapt and you know, make some changes to the paintings and really find this unique style that we were looking for Blood and Doom. And so Mark Graham was really a big part of this at the beginning, and he has since, over the course of these like 2.5-3 years, really also grown and improved as an art. Because when I see what he's making now, it's like, I mean, it has always been great, but it's now really, really amazing. And he's doing a lot of science fiction art as well. And he's working for the bigger studios. He's doing some other things, I think, for Modifius, and he did or was doing some things for oh wow, their name just eludes me. It's Traveler. All right, sorry, I went to check my collection. It's Mongoose. Okay, so I don't know why I couldn't come up with a name. So he did a lot of cool artwork for them as well, and it grew from that. And then once I knew what the style would be for the game, and we both had a good idea in our mind of what the world looked like, the characters. Then I just started finding more and more artists later on that also kind of, you know, made artwork in the same style, not exactly the same. And I actually like this fact that there's some slight differences in some of the scenes and the styles that you see throughout the book, but they could have been made by one artist. It's not very obvious. At the conventions, I used to play this game with the visitors because they were looking at the art and they were asking questions, and I was like, well, this is actually made by 6 different people, and they told me like, oh wow, I couldn't tell, you know, and then I pointed them out different paintings that were done by different artists, and they were like, oh, okay, yeah, now that you tell me, I can kind of see. But I think it's really nice that throughout the books, all of the books for Blood and Doom, that you have this uniform style that depicts the world and the characters and the setting and the monsters, and it really feels like a real place. And instead of like one art piece being sort of kind of cartoony maybe, and the other one being almost photorealistic, right? And that to me is always a bit of a disconnect when I see that in the same book. So yeah, I hope that explains it a bit.
Yeah, it does. Like you said, it's very nice to have a consistent art tone. It makes the world and the setting you describe also feel more consistent and real. If you have like one region of the world that's drawn in a very cartoony style, while a different region of the world is photorealistic, gritty art style, that just creates a disconnect in your mind and kind of breaks the illusion for me as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because I sometimes get emails from people who are interested in doing artwork for my game, and they send me these like anime kind of characters, and I love anime. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I ask myself, I don't think you've actually looked at Blood and Doom before you sent me this email, because it's pretty obvious that would not, that wouldn't fit in the game at all.
Yeah, it's everybody wants to have a chance to show off the artwork, especially in a big project such as this.
Yeah, of course, I understand it, but it's just that for my game I really wanted to fit the setting. Yeah.
You're very right. You're very right. All right, I want to get a bit into the mechanics of the game. Might be fun for the people listening to know how the game kind of works. So Blood and Doom uses a D10 dice pool system. One of the words that keeps being used over and over again in the description of it is cinematic action, fast combat. Can you tell us a bit about how the dice pool system works and how it helps achieve this feeling of cinematic action?
Yeah, okay, so first the basics is you have several abilities, and your ability score can vary from anywhere from 1 to 5. And then you also have skills, which have a skill rank, which also can vary between 1 and 5. Basically, how this dice pool works is, like most other actually, at its core, in that you take a number of D10 equal to that ability score and your skill rank. So let's say you have a strength score of 4, and your sword skill, or whichever other skill that you're using has a rank of 2, then you would take 6 D10s. And that is your dice pool. And that is the number of dice that you'll roll to see if you'll succeed your action or not. Now, what you'll want to do is you'll want to get as many successes as the difficulty, or higher, of course. So let's say the difficulty is 2, then I need to roll 2 successes in order to succeed. 2 or more, of course. So I'll roll those 6 D10, and then in my game, every 8 and every 9 is 1 success. And a 10 is 2 successes. So let's say I roll an 8 and there's also a 9. Okay, then I've got 2 successes and my action succeeds. Or I could have maybe just rolled a 10 and that would have been enough as well. Now, if I roll no 8 or 9 or 10 at all, I have 0 successes, my action fails, and so on. So anything below the 8, so the 7 and lower, you could actually ignore. Aside from the fact that there's one special die, and it's known as your setback die, and it's one of your D10s which needs to be of a different color than the rest, and you look at that. Actually, it functions the same as all the rest of the dice. So an 8, 9, and a 10 all give you successes. But what happens when you fail a roll? So if you don't get enough successes, then you look at your setback die. And if its result is a 1, a 2, or a 3, you suffer a setback. So you can compare that kind of to like a fumble or a critical failure. But it only applies if you already fail your roll. So if your roll succeeds, your setback die can basically be ignored because it will never trigger a setback. So that's kind of how the game works. And then there's the part where all the extra successes that you roll, so let's say the difficulty is 2, to strike a monster with your sword, then let's say you roll 4 successes instead. Well, you've got 2 extra successes, and that then is converted to momentum, as it's known. And you can spend this momentum at that time. You cannot save it up, so you can do several things with it immediately. Now, for example, in the case of attacking this monster, I could spend my momentum to trigger some of my weapons attributes, because all the weapons in Blood and Doom have one or more weapon attributes, like brutal, vicious, impaling, armor penetrating. There's powerful, massive, and there's a list of those, and each weapon is quite unique actually, because it doesn't just deal damage, it also has one or more of these attributes. And then you can spend momentum. For example, if I have a great axe with the brutal attribute and I have that 2 momentum, I can spend it to deal extra damage and cleave into my opponent's shoulder or arm or leg. And should I roll 3 momentum, I can actually chop off my opponent's arm or maybe a monstrous appendage. So all these different attributes can do very cool things by spending momentum on them. Other ways to spend momentum are, you can spend 1 momentum to help an ally. So let's say I do something and I do it so well that I have this momentum, and maybe one of my allies can benefit from what I'm doing on their turn. So I can spend the momentum to give them a boost, and then on their turn they gain edge to do what they wanted to do. And an edge is basically, you could compare it to like an advantage or disadvantage, in the fact that when you gain edge, you can add 1 extra die to your dice pool when you're doing something. So in the former example, where I was rolling 6 action dice to attack the monster, if I had edge, I could roll 7, right? But you can also suffer challenge, which is like the reverse, and then you take out a die. And this also stacks, so you can gain edge multiple times or challenge multiple times. So that kind of covers the basics with this momentum. And I think that the cinematic aspect that you were talking about comes from the fact that first, there is no set initiative order. So players and the game master kind of do things in an order that feels natural and that is determined by the action at the table. And one important thing to note is that in most games, they seem to tell you that all the action is happening at the same time. And it's usually like about 6 seconds, and what you're doing in a round is a representation of all those things happening at the same time. But in Blood and Doom, it actually works differently. It plays out like a scene in a movie. One thing happens, then another thing happens, and then another thing happens, and then another thing happens. So nothing is happening at the same time. It's like a sequence of events. And so when you actually, during playtesting, it was a lot of fun. And you really need to have tried this to know how much fun this can be and how this cinematic aspect comes into play. Because, you know, a monster attacks your ally and you're standing there and you're like, I want to do something. So the other player goes, I'm gonna jump on top of him and I'm gonna try and slice open his throat with my dagger. And then all of a sudden another player comes in and does something else, and then me as the game master, I'm reacting, because of course these monsters, they're not just gonna stand back. So it becomes more of a story. There's a reason why you are taking a turn. And you're not just taking a turn because it's like, oh, I'm number 3 and now I have to take a turn. And then I think also because the game is, it has enough crunch, I think, to satisfy players who are looking for some more tactical combat, but at the same time it's lightweight enough that everything is you can understand it well. It's easy to get into, and it just makes it faster paced, you know. And there's some other elements of the game and the rules that all promote this faster gameplay. For example, there's no class that can make 4 attacks on a turn, for example. So it's always like 1, and sometimes when you roll really well, there's some rules in the game that say, for instance, when you have a swift weapon like a katana, you can make 2 attacks. But you know, those are more like the exception than the rule. And so waiting for someone else's turn to end is also kept, you know, very short. So I hope that explains a bit what the cinematic action part and the fast-paced combat comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. That gives a very good insight into it. And I can imagine with the sequence of events stacking upon each other, you get that nice, like a choreographed fight scene, almost like a movie. Like one thing leads to another, escalation, The momentum is the right word for it, actually, because a good fight scene has momentum that carries it forward, that increases that tension and that interaction between the two actors fighting.
Exactly. And there's one final thing that I want to add, and as you know, the game is player facing, so I think it could be worth noting and maybe mentioning in this question that the players make all the dice rolls, well, most of the dice rolls anyway. So for example, if a player gets attacked by a monster, they will roll to defend instead of the Doomsayer rolling for the monster to attack, which kind of allows the Doomsayer to focus more on directing and orchestrating and narrating this entire combat scene, and they're just saying this happens and that happens, and the players meanwhile they're having to roll like I would need to defend, and so what this does is even when it's not a player's turn, they'll frequently have to do something. So everyone at the table is engaged at all times. So it's not just like, oh, I've just taken my turn and I know that, he or she is gonna take, 5 minutes to figure out which spell they're gonna fire. And I may as well now go and check my phone. No, it's not at all like that. You're alert and engaged at all times because you can be attacked by a monster at any time. You'll need to roll to defend, and not only that, there's many things and many options sometimes even to consider when you're defending. That makes it quite a lot of fun, and you're basically doing something all the time. And this also reminds me of some of board. I don't know if you play a lot of board games, but there are some board games that do this very well. Also, for example, Twilight Imperium. It has nothing to do with role playing, by the way. I don't know how I came up with this now, but in this game, which is like a 4X strategy space combat game, whatever someone is doing on their turn, everyone else also gets to do something when they execute that action on their turn. So actually, whenever it's someone's turn, everyone else is also doing something, and that's just an amazing way to be engaged at all times, because I'm super interested about this other player's turn, because I probably want to pitch in and do something related to what they're gonna do as well. And I think this works in a similar way in Blood and Doom, where when the Doomsayer is saying this is going to happen, that is going to happen, it's always up to the players to immediately react, to roll their dice and to see if they've maybe got a trait or a power or maybe an item that can be useful in helping them out.
Yeah, that's a great way to keep the players engaged and not, like you said, checking their phones. So the game and the classes are built up. There's 9 classes in the game currently, with each having 2 archetypes, which creates 18 very different kinds of characters. So I'm gonna have to ask you the tough question now. Which of your children, which of these 18s is your favorite? And can you tell us a bit about what makes that archetype and that class unique? What's its playstyle?
Oh my god. Yes, okay, so oh my god, this is a difficult question. But I will answer it. Okay, first you should know that the free primer books that are out right now, which allow everyone, by the way, to play the game completely for free. You can download it from Drive-Thru-RPG. Those actually include only 4 of the 9 classes at this point in time. And that's a total of 8 archetypes. And even though I have a lot of notes and a lot of writing already done on the other ones, it would be difficult for me at this point to call out any of those 5, because they're simply not finished yet, because that's what the Kickstarter is all about, is allowing us to raise enough funding to go and finish this entire project and, add all those things that we still want to add. So looking at the 4 classes that are available now, there's the Barbarian, the Guardian, the Assassin, and the Druid. I can definitely tell you that when I started the game, I think maybe the Barbarian was my favorite. But as it started developing and I started working more on the other classes, I think it shifted for me to the Druid. I always have liked Druids a lot because they're so versatile, and I just like this whole thing, that they have with nature and controlling the power of nature. I think it's, I don't know, there's something extremely powerful about this. But at this point in time, Pim, I decided I think I will go for the Assassin Viper. Yes, I will go for the Assassin Viper, which is one of the final ones. Yeah, it's one of the final ones that I finished for the primer books. And it can just do a lot of cool things. It has these masks that it can wear, which are like semi-magical, occult type masks that allow him to do things like see through illusions, put on like a demonic visage to scare people. The Viper can set up traps really quickly, really well. They can use poisons, and they've got so many other cool things that they actually can do. Venomous friends is very cool. They have a serpent, a spider, and a scorpion, and they can let those loose into a room and let them do their lethal work. And each of them functions quite differently. They're the master of disguise, and they have some quite very cool powers as well, like Kaiju Kiri, where they can, when they get dealt damage by an opponent, they actually deal them psychic damage back. So I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, so I would go with the Viper at this point. Yeah. But that being said, Pim, maybe if we talk again in half a year, it may be one of the classes that's still being added. Like, I'm looking very much forward to finishing up the Shaman, which can do some really cool things with spirits and rituals. So I think that may be my next favorite once it's done.
Yeah, every time you get a new toy to play with, it's the new favorite. I think many of us can find ourselves in that mindset. So yeah, we're almost out of our time. I have one final question for you. So everybody who listens to this will probably know that the one RPG that most people know is Dungeons and Dragons. But there's certain countries that have different
Dungeons and what?
RPGs.
I have never heard of this game. Sorry.
Yeah. I think you know it. I think you know it. So
okay.
So, but beyond Dungeons and Dragons, there's of course many other RPGs out there, and there's certain countries that have their own favorites besides D&D. Like Germany has the Schwarze Auge, or the Dark Eyes, known in English. In Britain, you have Warhammer as both a tabletop game and also the RPG games that are inspired by it. Dicetale Games is settled in the Netherlands, and we don't really have like a Dutch RPG to call our own and to like represent our country. Is Blood and Doom gonna become our national RPG of choice, do you think? The Dark Eye of the Netherlands?
I hope so. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned this because I don't recall, and apologies if I'm insulting anyone out there who maybe has, published a very famous Dutch TTRPG, but I couldn't quite come up with one on the fly. At least not one that's in the English language and that's aiming at the international market. So maybe, and it's funny that you say this because when we went to Essen Spiel, so this German gaming convention, many people were talking about the Schwarze Auge, and I was like, I had heard of it, right? But they know this better than they know Dungeons and Dragons, which is this really struck me as very interesting. I was like, oh, I had no idea. I mean, people there were more familiar with the Schwarze Auge than with Dungeons and Dragons. So who knows, maybe in 20 years' time, people in the Netherlands will talk about Blood and Doom and they will be like, oh yes, of course there's Dungeons and Dragons, but Blood and Doom, this is our game, right? Who knows, maybe. I say this jokingly because I know it's probably never gonna happen, but it would be fun to dream about this. But I do notice that many of our fellow Dutchmen and Dutch women are quite happy about this, and they think it's pretty fun that there's something just around it. And some of them don't know. It's funny, on the Kickstarter they asked me, does this game would it be expensive to ship it to the Netherlands with the customs? And I told them, well, actually, I think you'll get the best shipping rates possible because I can basically just send it. Maybe I'll come over and bring it to your house,
Personal delivery service.
Very
That's
interesting. Nice. Yeah. Yeah, I know. By the way, it's very funny. When I was in Japan several years ago, I also noticed that there was no Dungeons and Dragons on the shelves in the bookstores there, but I did see Call of Cthulhu. So it's interesting to see. Yeah, they did have Call of Cthulhu and no Dungeons and Dragons, and Call of Cthulhu is actually quite popular there. So yeah, that differs. It differs per country, and also many people are asking for translations of the book: Italian, French, German. Of course, I want to say yes, but I'll just be honest and tell them like maybe this could happen, but not before the initial release is completed and we've got some customer base and we can we're established, and then maybe maybe next year we could think about doing some of those translations. Yeah. Or in Dutch, of course. Then in this, that could be.
I mean, that should be the first language it's translated into. Let's be honest here.
Yes, it's true. But funnily enough, I didn't think about it because nobody actually asked me. And you know why, Pim? It's because us Dutch people, we read and understand English so well that it doesn't really come up like, oh, we need this to be done. But
exactly.
I think just for the sake of it, it could be very nice to have Blood and Doom be released in Dutch as well. Bloed en verdoemenis is what it would be called.
Awesome. Thank you, Ferrucio, for taking the time to talk with me today.
Yeah.
Where can people find you and Blood and Doom?
It was a great pleasure, and thank you too. And where they can find me is, I don't know if you are posting a link to the Kickstarter.
Yeah, of course.
As for now, so the Kickstarter would be the best place to go. And also you can find us at Dicetale Games on every social media platform, be it Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, or Facebook. So at Dicetale Games, you can look for us there. And also, if you just go to dicetalegames.com or bloodanddoom.com, you come to our website. You can sign up for our newsletter. And of course, go to DriveThruRPG and type in Blood and Doom, and don't forget, and is spelled A-N-D. You don't use a symbol. And then you'll find the primer bundle. You can download it for free, check out the game. And as of today, our first adventure, Faces of Evil, is also available now for free on DriveThruRPG, including some quick start characters, so you could get Blood and Doom to the table immediately and start playing the same day. So those are the best places, and for now and until the end of April, the Kickstarter would be. I would definitely ask people to come and have a look and see what it's all about.
All right, I hope everybody finds you there. And I was the Pim for Crosshead Studios. You can find Crosshead everywhere on social media at CrossheadDM. Please also check out the new Crossland project, where we're making an interactive world map that can be used in several different tabletop RPGs, for VTTs in this case. And be sure to also check out the Dungeon Pop Kickstarter, which has partnered with Crosshead to do their art for them. Ferrucio, once again, thank you for joining me, and for everybody listening out there, good luck and good night.